Christy ma'am, are you there?
Yeah, I'm doing that. I'm sharing the YouTube here. So now it's live. So once again, I extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you on our second day of our virtual conference. I'm glad that we are doing many conferences, and it's really important to have a touch with literature in these lockdown times. And today, our principal said, "Ma'am, do as much as possible because most of us are stuck, and we should not lose our touch with our subject." And that is an idea that we had initially to do constantly. We are doing on and off programs, and I. I have to mention Fatima. She has been my pillar. She's been helping me a lot during this time. She knows how hard it is, to conduct a conference. She came voluntarily. We don't have any connection, and through our last conference, she was with us, and through that she came, "Ma'am, I will help you out," and I'm very much grateful for that, Fatima. I have to tell that, and she has taken a lot of initiatives. So I have to mention this today because right from the registration and right from corresponding with the participant, she has been doing wonderful job, and she's been helping me a lot. Thank you, Fatima. And I also welcome Preetham. He's also again from our last conference. He's also helping us out. I'm very much thankful to you, Preetham. I also welcome Vincent sir also. And over to you, Fatima. You can introduce Preetham.
Thank you ma'am. Good noon to all the academicians.
Fatima, I need to be a little bit louder.
Good noon to all the academicians. I warmly welcome our respected Dr. Vincent Alva sir for his esteemed presence today with us. And I heartily welcome our esteemed resource person for today's session, the most eminent personality of the teaching fraternity, K. Preetham sir. K. Preetham sir completed his Masters in English Literature in the year 2008 with a university rank from Bangalore University. He qualified KSET in 2015 and is pursuing PhD in Bangalore University. He is also a Cambridge University certified oral examiner for Business English Certification exam. He has presented papers in more than 20 national and international conferences, and six research papers have been published in UGC Care journals, and 5 articles are published as chapters in books and magazines. He has completed 8 SWAM FDP courses on research and English skills. He has completed 35 international online courses in English from reputed international universities. Further, he has participated in more than 100 webinars. He has more than 11 years of teaching and training experiences at undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate levels across streams like BSc, BE, MBA, verbal aptitude for CAT, and other competitive exams. He has also trained IT and non-IT professionals. At present, he is rendering his services as Assistant Professor in English at Center for Management Studies, Jain University, Bangalore, and is also training CAT aspirants. So I warmly welcome you, sir. It's over to you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, ma'am. I thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity. Am I audible? And please confirm whether I am
Yes,
audible.
sir. Yes, sir. You are very much audible.
Yeah, thank you. I thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity to deliver my first talk as a resource person in this reputable virtual conference, 7-day virtual conference. I consider it as an honor on my part. So the topic for today.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you. The topic for today's discussion is capsulation of epi or pandemic in British literature. So why I've chosen the word capsulation? Capsulation means at one level, gist of epidemic or pandemic as reflected in British literature. Other meaning is whenever we are suffering from any diseases or illness, we consume medicines in the form of capsule. So here the word capsulation has two meanings. One is the gist of pandemic and epidemic in British literature. Other meaning is how literature could be used as a medicine that during epidemic or pandemic. I request all the participants to mute themselves. Okay. As you all know, the basic difference between epidemic and pandemic is pandemic, any infectious diseases that is spread over a smaller part of area, you call it as epidemic. When it crosses beyond, let's say beyond states, beyond nations, killing many people, you can call it as pandemic. So I hope you all are aware of this nursery rhyme. Ringa ringa roses, a pocket full of posies, atisho atisho, we all fall down. So for us, this is just for a fun kind of rhyme, but it has lot of metaphorical.
Must work on it. Even we as a teacher must know, must use this principle in our teaching learning situations also.
Participants, please mute yourselves. It is a request, please mute yourselves. Participants, please mute yourselves. Please cooperate with us. Thank you.
Thank you. So at metaphorical level, it has lot of meanings. Okay, actually, it refers to the Great London Plague, which killed a quarter of the London population. So here, ringa ringa roses refers to the blotchiness of complexion induced by fever. Blotchiness refers to the discoloration of skin. The posies refers to flowers that is used to stifle or reduce the stink that is coming out of dead bodies because of plague. Many people have died. Atisho atisho refers to the sneezing, and we all fall down refers to how people die when they are infected by plague or any other infectious diseases. So this pandemic or epidemic is not new to us. It's not a 21st century.
Excuse me, Preetham.
Yes,
The
ma'am?
participants are saying your volume is a bit low. Can you please check on your volume?
Just a minute. I've increased the volume.
You speak and I'll let you know, Preetham.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. So this epidemic or pandemic is not a invention or a discovery of the 20th or 21st century. The infection, any infectious diseases is in existence since the stage of hunting and food gathering. So human evolution took place since that time. During those days, it was only infectious diseases, but people moved from one place to another. Only when people started settling in one place or leading a communal way of living, it became infectious, it became an epidemic and a pandemic. So we have references of this plague or any other infectious diseases since the Old Testament. So here, the word plague is said to have its origin in the Latin word plaga, meaning stroke or wound, associated with the Greek plaga, meaning strike or blow. The most famous plagues in the Bible were those that occurred during the Exodus of Egypt. In the Passover story, the Pharaoh denied Moses the liberation of the Israelites, prompting God to send 10 plagues to punish the Egyptian ruler. In Homer's Iliad, a deadly plague visits the Greek camp at Troy and as castigation for Agamemnon's crimes against Chrysis, a Trojan woman. For some people, apocalypse has already started. For people who believe in indigenous futurisms, the proponent by name Grace L. Dillon and other supporters or authors belonging to colored stream, N.K. Jemison's Broken Earth series, Claire G. Coleman's Terra Nullius, and Carmen Maria Machado's short story Inventory. They all say apocalypse has already started, and the main reason for the spread of epidemic or pandemic is the colonizers. See, the common cold that we get during rainy season is not an indigenous disease. So there are reports that say we got common cold from the colonizers. So and this catharsis is not just literal; it is also metaphorical and has obliterated many populations. For example, if you take the native population of America, especially the Red Indians and native population of Australia, New Zealand, okay, all here the colonizers have killed the natives either through willful destruction or through diseases due to, and many people have died due to lack of medication also. Pandemics. So what is the main function of any pandemic literature? It offers a catharsis. Catharsis refers to purgation of emotions at the times of crisis. Pandemic has, over the history of Western literature, offered much in the way of catharsis, ways of processing strong emotion, and political commentary on how human beings respond to public health crisis. However, the catharsis that typical literary texts may offer is troubled by the realities of pandemic and apocalypse condition. Apocalypse refers to destruction, end of the beginning of destruction, end of the world. Apocalypse conditions depicted in much fiction by indigenous people. If we use our own likely forthcoming periods of self-isolation to theorize alternative social structures, to tell one another stories about how we live, what stories might we tell? So because of this reason, people in the older or the early ages maintained a distant life, maintained social distance. Literature has a vital role to play in framing our responses to any pandemic. It is worth turning to some of these texts to better understand our reactions on how we mitigate racism, xenophobia, and albinism. Mitigate means how we avoid, reduce. Racism, you can, if you watch international news, you will be aware that in America there is a racial fight between the blacks and the white. And xenophobia refers to the prejudices that person has towards people of other countries or other states or other religion. And albinism refers to prejudices or indifference towards people who have disabilities. So all this which we are experiencing today were experienced in the past also, and literature is used to mitigate this. There has always been literature of pandemic because there has always been pandemics. What marks literature of plague? Pestilence. Pestilence refers to fatal epidemic disease. And pandemic is a commitment to try and forge, if not some sense of explanation, then at least a sense of meaning out of a raw experience of panic, horror, and despair. This literary or pandemic narrative is an attempt to starve off meaninglessness. See, if you are aware of Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, you see there is a lot of hopelessness, meaninglessness, human beings are tense. Similarly, today, many people do not find any meaning in their life due to loss of their closed ones, death of the closed ones, or loss of livelihood, loss of employment. So literature offers a panacea for them. And in the void of the pandemic, literature serves the purpose of trying, however desperately, to stop the bleeding. Ranging from the classics to the contemporary novels, pandemic literature offers something in the way of an uncertain comfort and a guide for what happens next. So just because of the pandemic, it's not the end of the world. Literature guides us, tells us there have been pandemics since the stages of hunting and food gathering. So even then human race has survived. So there is no need to panic. So one of the first selections that I have chosen for this presentation is Homer's Iliad, 1260 to 1180 BC. So Western literature begins with a plague. In this picture, you can see how the gods themselves have descended to battle the pandemic to protect the people. The Song of Ilion or Song of Ilium is an ancient Greek epic poem traditionally attributed to Homer. Set during the Trojan War, the 10-year siege of the city of Troy by a coalition of Greek states, it tells of the battles and events during the weeks of a quarrel between King Agamemnon and warrior Achilles. The Iliad is paired with something of a sequel, the Odyssey. After an invocation to the Muses, the story launches in medias res towards the end of the Trojan War. Medias res means in between of the Trojan War between the Trojans and the besieging Greeks. Chryses, a Trojan priest of Apollo, offers the Greeks wealth for the return of his daughter Chryses, held captive by Agamemnon, the Greek leader. Although most of the Greek army is in favor of the offer, Agamemnon refuses. Then what does Chryses do? Chryses prays for Apollo's help, and Apollo causes a plague to afflict the Greek army. After 9 days of plague, Achilles, the leader of Myrmidon contingent, calls an assembly to deal with the problem. Under pressure, Agamemnon agrees to return Chryses to her father, but decides to take Achilles captive, Briseis, as compensation. Achilles furiously declares that he and his men will no longer fight for Agamemnon and will go home. Odysseus takes a ship and returns Chryses to her father, whereupon Apollo ends the plague. So regarding this Homer's Iliad, Cambridge classicist Mary Beard opines, Iliad opens with a plague visited upon the Greek camp at Troy to punish the Greeks from Agamemnon's enslavement of Chryses. US academic Daniel R. Blickman argues the drama of Agamemnon and Achilles' quarrel should not blind us to the role of the plague in setting the tone for what follows, nor more importantly, in providing an ethical pattern which lies near the heart of the story. In other words, the Iliad presents a narrative framing device of disaster that results from ill-judged behavior on the part of all of the characters involved. The next work is Giovanni Boccaccio's Decameron, 1353. See here in this picture, you can see how storytelling is used as a solace during the time of epidemic or pandemic. So this is set in the context of Black Death. It reveals the vital role of storytelling at the time of disaster. The Decameron, with its frame conceit of 100 bawdy means humorously indecent, hilarious and erotic stories told by 7 women and 3 men over 10 days while they are quarantined in a Tucson villa outside Florence. In the course of their isolation, the characters take turns to tell stories of morality, love, sexual politics, trade, and power. Every person born into this world has a natural right to sustain, preserve, and defend. This is the perception. Preserve and defend their own life so that storytelling becomes its own palliative to drown out the howling of those dying on the other side of ivy-covered stone walls. Palliative means a kind of relieving pain reliever. It's like a painkiller tablets. Storytelling is like a painkiller tablets at the time of pandemics. So what is its impact? It restructures the normal life. So storytelling functions as a method of discussing some structures and interaction during the earliest days of Renaissance. The stories offer the listeners ways through which to restructure their normal everyday lives which have been suspended due to epidemic. So most of us are not aware regarding what Black Death is. Therefore, I have a short video so that since we all are millennials or born during the 20th and 20th century, we are not aware of the problems faced by the world, and we are not even appreciating the efforts put in by the scientists, those who have sacrificed their life to end the epidemic. So in order to create awareness, I am just sharing a short video on Black Death.
The delirious victim staggers about in his final moments. His speech is slurred, skin purple-black, covered with swollen, pus-filled lumps as death calls him. Witnesses to this terrifying spectacle called it the Danse Macabre, or Dance of Death. In the 14th century, a terrible catastrophe.
Pritam sir, video cannot be seen.
Africa.
I don't know whether it's video cannot be seen.
Yes, Pritam, video is not there.
We can hear the voice, but not the video.
I will replay it, sir. I will replay it. Now are you able to see, sir?
No,
No,
no.
no. You go to that, that video, right? You click on that.
Yes, sir.
Only that part we can see, not the video. Video doesn't get played on the screen, but we can hear the dialogues or the music.
Okay, just a minute.
You go to that, that video, right? You click on that. Only that part we can see, not the video. Video doesn't get played on the screen, but we can.
Now is it visible, sir?
Yes, now it's fine. Now it's fine.
Okay,
Play it.
okay,
Play it.
okay, okay.
And you can enlarge the screen also,
Sure,
I
sir.
think.
Sure, sir.
Yeah, good, good. Go ahead.
The delirious victim staggers about in his final moments. His speech is slurred, skin purple-black, covered with swollen, pus-filled lumps as death calls him. Witnesses to this terrifying spectacle called it the Dance Macabre, or Dance of Death. In the 14th century, a terrible catastrophe fell upon Asia, Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa that would change the course of history. The Black Death. The Black Death, or bubonic plague, was an outbreak of disease that killed 1/3 of the European population in the period 1347 to 1350. It had a similarly devastating impact in Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa. The disease played no favorites. Rich and poor, young and old, priest and peasant, all fell victim to this horrible and, at the time, unexplained sickness, which was spreading like wildfire. The populations of entire towns and villages were wiped out in a matter of days. The dead were buried in mass graves to cope with the rapid death toll. Only a thin covering of soil was placed over the dead bodies before another layer was buried on top. Pope Clement VI consecrated, made sacred, the Rhone River so corpses could be thrown straight into it. So, what is the Black Death? Where did it come from? While it's difficult to trace with any real certainty, the outbreak is believed to have originated in the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, early in the 14th century. Prior to this, the disease had existed for centuries in regions of Asia, with small outbreaks occurring from time to time. Any one of these could have been the source. Once infected, the victim would first experience a high fever, aching limbs, and fatigue. Within days, the lymph nodes in the neck, armpits, and groin would start to swell and turn black. These black swellings are where the Black Death gets its name. Michael Placentius, first-hand witness to the horrors of the Black Death, wrote, "Here, not only the burn blisters appeared, but there have developed gland boils on the groin, the thighs, the arms, or on the neck. At first, these were the size of a hazelnut and developed accompanied by violent shivering fits, which soon rendered those attacked so weak that they could not stand up, but were forced to lie in their beds, consumed by violent fever. Soon the boils grew to be the size of a walnut, then to that of a hen's egg or a goose's egg, and they were exceedingly painful and irritated the body, causing the sufferer to vomit blood. The sickness lasted 3 days, and on the 4th, the latest, the patient succumbed. The stinking pus-filled swellings, otherwise known as buboes, gave the bubonic plague its name. Their nervous system under attack, victims would become crazed and delirious with fever. Once the swollen lymph nodes started to burst within the body, the sufferer was not long for this world. Death usually occurred within the week. By the time the infected person who had introduced the disease to the port, town, or village died, others would already be in the early stages of infection. This made preventing an epidemic incredibly difficult. The outbreak of the Black Death in the 14th century actually involved 3 different strains of plague. The most common and visually the most gruesome form is the bubonic plague. The second form was the pneumonic plague. It infects the respiratory system once the bubonic strain reaches the lungs. The third form, septicemic plague, infects the body's circulatory system, that is, the blood. The bubonic plague is actually the weakest of the 3 strains. During the worst outbreaks of the Black Death, pneumonic and septicemic plague had mortality rates of almost 100%. It's believed malnutrition played a major role in making the symptoms more dramatic. Many who died had endured years of famine, the result of severe storms and drought, making their weakened immune system vulnerable.
Yes, through this video, we can assess to what extent it was very devastating. We should feel fortunate enough that we are living in an age where we have appropriate medical facilities. The next work is Plague and Pandemic in Shakespeare's Time. So if you look at this picture, you can see a baby is feeding on the dead mother. Its mother is dead and its caretaker is also dead. On the left side, you can see carts full of dead bodies. This was the situation of plague and pandemic during the Shakespeare's time. Shakespeare's great escape from the plague changed theatre, in fact, changed literature, you can say. When plague hit London in 1592, am I audible? Please confirm.
Yes, sir, you are very much audible.
When plague hit London in 1592, theatres across the city closed down. They remained dark for virtually the entirety of its outbreak, lasting from the autumn of 1592 to May 1594. Another severe bout of plague hit from April 1603 to April 1604. During these times, the only option for Shakespeare and other actors was to tour the provinces. With no demand for new plays, the 1592 to 94 plague led Shakespeare to turn to poetry and is thought to have written narrative poems Venus and Adonis and The Rape of Lucrece during this time. Shakespeare's famous work, romance, Romeo and Juliet, believed to have been written around 1595, contains the famous line from Mercutio, "A plague, O both your houses." Written post 1603, Timon of Athens sees the title character isolate himself in a cave after cursing all the Athenians by wishing a plague upon them. He even goes as far as to invoke breath infect breath, or at their society as their friendship may or merely poison. A little dramatic compared to today's social distancing measures. In another work, King Lear, highly likely to have been written between 1605 and 1606, been influenced by the 1603 to 1604 crisis, or possibly even the big outbreak in the summer of 1606. If Shakespeare wrote the play in quarantine, it certainly shows in Lear's desolate outlook as he cries into the storm, vengeance, plague, death, confusion. Even in Lear, you can find Next work is Macbeth. Macbeth again sees disease infiltrate the language he uses. When Macbeth is unsure about killing Duncan, he fears Macbeth's procrastination. During that time, he fears the repercussions which may arise to plague the inventor, that they might quite literally infect him. So Macbeth is afraid that he may be attacked by plague if he commits that sin. However, in the other work of Shakespeare, The Two Gentlemen of Verona, there is some optimism. Shakespeare opines, hope is a lover's staff. Walk hence with that, and manage it against despairing thoughts. So though in the three prominent plays there is information about plague, in the Two Gentlemen of Verona there is some optimism in the works of Shakespeare. The next work is Journal of the Plague Year by Daniel Defoe, 1722. Here also we can see how the dead people who are affected by plague are removed or dumped into graveyards or pits mercilessly. Oh, death, 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 screams a woman from the window of a house near Cornwall. But there is no response. No neighbor stirs, and the street is deserted except for the narrator. What does he do? Even he can't help because he has a chill in his blood. The man then simply continues his journey through the city of London streets. This book is a fascinating record of trying to cope during the capital's last plague epidemics of 1665. Daniel Defoe was only around 5 years old during the Great Plague that claimed nearly 1 lakh people. This makes a Journal of a Plague Year, originally published in 1722, an imaginative reconstruction. Its shadowy narrator, known only as HF, seeks to record the terrifying progress of a disease that had no known cause and therefore no known cure. Defoe uses his skills as a journalist, novelist, and Londoner to knit together evidence with storytelling. In doing so, he presents a vivid picture of a plague epidemic, but also the mean streets of 17th century London. Some inhabitants are shown to be brave and caring, but many are understandably plain, scared, confused, and desperate. The most sensational and wicked acts tend to be reported as hearsay, with the weekly bills of mortality acting as sobering anchors of evidence. These most human of idiosyncrasies should not detract from the fact that a journal is the most comprehensive account of plague we have. Louis Landa's exhaustive notes from the 1969 edition, a 4-page appendix includes a medical note of the plague with an analysis of Defoe's understanding of the disease. So in this work also there is a lot of documentation of the plague, experiences of the plague. The next work is Last Man, 1826 by Mary Shelley. Here in this picture you can see there is only one person with his pet. So this picture suggests that when you lose your near and dear ones, animals can act as a solace for you, as better companions for you. The normality of everyday life is also the focus of Mary Shelley's apocalypse novel, The Last Man, 1826, is set in a futuristic Britain between the years 2070 and 2000. That is, we are in 2020 now, 50 years from now, it is set long away in 1826 itself. The novel, which was made into a movie in 2008, details the life of Lionel Verney, who becomes the last man following a devastating global plague. Shelley's novels dwells on the value of friendship and concludes with Verney accompanied on his wanderings by a sheepdog, a reminder that pets may be a source of comfort and stability in the time of crisis. The novel is particularly scathing on the topic of institutional responses to the plague. It satirizes revolutionary utopianism and the infighting that breaks out among surviving groups before these also succumb. So the novel questions why people fight in the name of religion, caste, creed, color, when all are destined to die and destined to die early because of any epidemic or pandemic. It has also painted an apocalyptic picture of a future world torn by a plague. Only a few people are immune to the diseases. They avoid contact with the rest of the world. This novel showed a deep understanding of 19th century medical advances and was also one of the first to make famous the concept of immunization. Immunization today, even now, many people are hesitant to get their children immunized. And there are also reports due to expiry polio drops, many kids are dead because of immunization. So there is still a lot of confusion regarding the immunization process. However, it is the only mechanism that we have to prevent ourselves from being victims of any diseases. Mary Shelley created Frankenstein and then a pandemic. Frankenstein, it is about a monster, was Mary Shelley's earlier work, and then the other work, that is The Last Man, on pandemic. Whereas the pandemic also focuses on a kind of monster through an epidemic. Our novel, The Last Man, predicted the political causes of and collective solutions for global plague. Shelley saw the disaster of a pandemic would be driven by politics, just like today. Today also we are even for COVID-19 we are citing political reasons. This politics would be deeply personal yet international in scope. The spiraling health crisis would be caused by what people and their leaders had done and failed to do on the international stage. It could be in trade, war, and interpersonal bargains, pacts, and conflicts that precede them. The Last Man is set in the year 2100. The novel's driving conflict is a highly contagious disease. Like the coronavirus, the novel's plague spreads by a combination of airborne particles and contact with carriers. In both cases, it has been incubated, exacerbated, and left unchecked by destructive human behavior. See, in both cases, in a sense, even during, let's say, 19th century, people committed the same mistake. They didn't check it, they didn't take any preventive measures. We, despite having a lot of experience of many pandemics, despite advancement in technology, we didn't do anything to prevent coronavirus. Verney is a humble shepherd boy who marries into the royal family at Windsor Castle. He quickly ascends to the top of the leadership ranks. He serves as a trusted advisor to lords, ministers, and legislators, and as the plague breaks out, he moves to Constantinople, then creeps towards London. After Verney leads a failed expedition of plague survivors from the crumbled Republic of England to the vacant coast of Italy. So he leads the plague survivors to coast of Italy. By the time they reach Rome, only he is left. He is left alone in Rome to contemplate the future. So even then he is not desperate or demotivated. What does he do? He climbs to the top of the dome of St. Peter's Basilica and carves the year 2100 in the stone. In other words, Verney realizes that even if he is the last man on earth, he must live as though he is not. He must sustain humanity by acting upon his profound sense of interconnectedness of his fate with other forms of life, human or not. As with the coronavirus outbreak, travelers in the Last Man dispersed the deadly disease across continents, infecting their own families and communities. So here we should exercise caution. When we go out, we are not only risking the life of ourselves, but also that of our family members and the place we live in. The unexpectedly hopeful ending of The Last Man suggests that all disasters, however threatening to particular individuals or countries, are ultimately about humanity's responsibility to the world as a whole. So here Last Man suggests that one should not lose hope even at the time of pandemic. The next work is Edgar Allan Poe's short story, The Mask of the Red Death, 1842. Here you can see the mask here. Death is disguised behind the mask. So what does this deal with? Here, it depicts the failure of authority and figures to adequately and humanly respond to such a disaster. The Red Death causes fatal bleeding from the pores. In response, Prince Prospero. So when his entire kingdom is suffering from a pandemic, what does this king Prince Prospero do? He takes his men or closely associated people with him to his mansion, and they start enjoying. But ultimately, death, disguising in the form of human being, wearing a mask, comes and kills him. Prince Prospero gathers 1,000 courtiers into a secluded but luxurious abbey, welds the gates closed, and hosts a mass ball. The external world could take care of itself. This is what he says in arrogant tone. The external world could take care of itself. In the meantime, it was folly to grieve or to think. The prince had provided all the appliances of pleasure. Poe details the sumptuous festivities, concluding with the incorporeal arrival of the Red Death as a human-like guest at the ball. I'll be playing the video. You will be able to connect it better. The plague personified takes the prince's life and then those of his courtiers, and one by one dropped the revelers in the blood-bedewed halls of their revel, and died each in the despairing posture of his fall. See here, the Prince Prospero, despite being the prince, he forgot his duty towards his people. Instead of protecting them, he started enjoying with his closely associated people in his mansion. And finally, even he could not escape. Even he could not escape from death. finally death conquers him.
அம்மிட்ட போய்
And
சொல்லலாம்.
the video describes how this king was enjoying at the time of pandemic.
அம்மி எனக்கு ஆசையா இருக்கு. கை கழுவினியா போய் ஹேண்ட் வாஷ் பண்ணிட்டு வா. Sorry, my mic was on. Sorry.
Ma'am, is the video visible now?
Yeah.
Okay. So they start their party around 8 o'clock. This is how the prince and his accomplices are enjoying when other people are suffering from pandemic.
Until at length there commenced the sounding of midnight upon the clock, and there was an uneasy cessation of all things as before. But now there were 12 strokes to be sounded by the bell of the clock, and perhaps that more of thought crept with more of time into the meditations of those who revelled. And thus too it happened, that before the last echoes of the last chime had utterly sunk into silence, there were many individuals in the crowd who had found leisure to become aware of the presence of a masked figure which had arrested the attention of no single individual before. The figure in question had gone beyond the bounds of even the prince's indefinite decorum. The whole company seemed now deeply to feel that in the costume and bearing of the stranger neither wit nor propriety existed.
Who dares?
This is Prince Prospero.
Who dares insult us with this blasphemous mockery? Seize him and unmask him, that we may know who we have to hang at sunrise.
For the mask which concealed the visage was made so nearly to resemble the countenance of a stiffened corpse. His vesture was dabbled in blood, and his broad brow, with all the features of the face, was besprinkled with the scarlet horror. But from a certain nameless awe with which the mad assumptions of the mummer had inspired the whole party, there were found none who put forth a hand to seize him, so that unimpeded he passed within a yard of the prince's person, and while the vast assembly, as if with one impulse, shrank from the centers of the rooms to the walls, he made his way uninterruptedly. But with the same solemn and measured step which had distinguished him from the first, through the blue chamber to the purple, through the purple to the green, through the green to the orange, through this
This is Red Death.
again to the white, and even thence to the violet, ere a decided movement had been made to arrest him. It was then, however, that Prince Prospero, maddening with rage and the shame of his own momentary cowardice, rushed hurriedly through the 6 chambers, while none followed him on account of a deadly terror that had seized upon all. And now was acknowledged the presence of the Red Death. He had come like a thief in the night, and one by one dropped the revelers in the blood-bedewed halls of their revel, and died each in the despairing posture of his fall. And the life of the ebony clock went out with that of the last of the gay, and the flames of the candles expired. And darkness and decay and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all.
So this is how Red Death killed Prince Prospero for his arrogance. The next work is Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, the 1847 work. Okay, here also you can see the distance, how the distance is maintained between the infected person and Jane Eyre. So when Jane is 10 or 11, typhus runs rampant. Here the plague that is infecting characters in Jane Eyre is typhus. Typhus runs rampant at Lowood, the charity school to which she has been consigned by her aunt, who despises her. Lowood is a bleak house, as Jane describes it. Semi-starvation and neglected colds had predisposed most of the pupils to receive infection. 45 of the 80 girls lay ill at one time. Some girls have friends similar to present day. Those who can afford medical treatment, they survive. Others simply die. Some girls have friends and relations willing to move them from the seat of contagion. Some go home only to die. Some die at school and are buried quickly. The nature of the malady forbidding delay. Those that are vulnerable become during an epidemic more vulnerable. So whom we consider vulnerable today is people above 60 and young small children. And for those such as Jane who remained well, classes were broken up, rules relaxed. The few who continued well were allowed almost unlimited license. So just like how we have the positive in the pandemic, the entire education industry became transformed itself into a digital mode. Similarly, in Jane Eyre also, there was improvement in infrastructure and the students got better facilities. Those who read Jane Eyre when they were younger may remember that Helen Burns, Jane's friend, dies during the period. So the picture that I showed you is of that her friend who is on her deathbed. Helen dies in her arms. What readers might not recall is that Helen is not one of the typhus patients. She has long suffered from consumption or tuberculosis and has in fact been isolated from the other girls. When Jane, the child, goes to the darkened school to where Helen is going by moonlight, coming through the windows, there is a place she knows not to enter, filled as it is with schoolmates who have succumbed to the epidemic. An odor of camphor and burnt vinegar warned me when I came near the fever room, and I passed its door quickly. So, similar to containment rooms, today even they had fever rooms where infected people were kept, and odor of camphor and vinegar hinted about it. The typhus runs its course and disappears. The school, thus improved, became in time a truly useful and noble institution. In some ways, with COVID-19, we are as vulnerable as the Victorians were, given the novelty of the virus, our lack of immunity, the inequalities that make its depredations worse. We are all like a child in a dark hallway, but in many other respects, of course, we are lucky. COVID-19 has not proved as deadly as smallpox, which has been eradicated, or typhus. So we have got ourselves immunized of smallpox and other things. Last declared case was in 1970s. After there is no evident case of smallpox. So we should consider ourselves lucky. The next work is Charles Dickens' Bleak House, 1852. Here you can see the fever room where epidemics and social distancing in Bleak House. Esther Summerson realizes that the young girl who is sitting with her, Charlie, is very sick. Esther knows that both she and Charlie, who works in the household, had been in the company of a boy who had, in the words of another character, a very bad sort of fever about him. And just as Charlie says, I think I am ill, Esther hears the voice of Ada Clare. So Esther and Charlie are in a room, and she hears that Charlie is ill. Simultaneously, she overhears the conversation or the noise of Ada Clare, who is entering the room. Immediately, she goes and shuts the room to prevent Ada Clare from entering. Esther does not hesitate. I hurry. This is what she says. I hurried to the door of communication between my room and a pretty sitting room and locked it. Just in time, tapped at it while my hands was yet upon the key. Esther Summerson is one of the great heroines of literature, in part because she understands the vital importance of social distancing and isolation. Even when it is hard, Dickens does not name the illness, but based on his description, Charlie and so on, Esther seemed to have contracted smallpox. Before Esther slips into delirium, she makes Charlie, whom she has nursed and who by then has recovered enough to nurse her, promise not to let anyone in, especially not Ada. Because of the precautionary measures that Esther and Charlie takes, Ada is safe. Esther locks the room and prevents entry of Ada Clare. Bleak House was published in serial installments in 1852 to 53 before Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch had developed the modern germ theory of disease. Social distancing was and is a blunt instrument for preventing the spread of disease in the absence of other scientific tricks. So most of us are not aware the impact of smallpox. I have the last small video on smallpox. It's just a 1 minute video. It will help us to understand the impact. I'll just share it.
Smallpox is an ancient deadly disease that has existed for 3,000 years. An estimated 300 million people died from smallpox in the 20th century alone. It was fatal in up to a third of people infected. Early symptoms include high fever and fatigue. This takes between 7 and 17 days after exposure. At this point, the disease becomes contagious. The virus then produces a distinctive rash, particularly on the face, arms, and legs. The most infectious period is during the first week of illness. The resulting spots become filled with clear fluid and later pus, and then form a crust, which eventually dries up and falls off. The person remains contagious right up until the last scab is removed. The virus spreads through person-to-person contact and saliva droplets in an infected person's breath. In 1796, Edward Jenner famously experimented with the origins of what would become a vaccine, but it wasn't until 1959 that a global eradication effort began. The last naturally occurring case of smallpox was diagnosed on 26th of October 1977. It was officially declared eradicated in 1979. Some governments believe there is a risk that the virus which causes smallpox still exists in places other than laboratories and could be deliberately released to cause harm. The World Health Organization claims it is impossible to assess the risk of an outbreak, but they are helping governments prepare for this grim possibility. Smallpox is an ancient deadly disease.
So I'll move on to the last work that I've considered for this presentation. That is Year of Wonders by Geraldine Brooks, 2001. It's a recent work. Okay, here when an infected bolt of cloth. So here also you can see how the dead bodies are dumped into pits. When an infected bolt of cloth carries plague from London to an isolated village, a housemaid named Anna Frith emerges as an unlikely heroine and healer. Through Anna's eyes, we follow the story of the fateful year of 1666, as she and her fellow villagers confront the spread of disease and superstition. As death reaches into every household and villagers turn from prayers to murderous witch hunting, Anna must find the strength to confront the disintegration of a community and the lure of illicit love. As she struggles to survive and grow, a year of catastrophe becomes instead Annus Mirabilis. Annus Mirabilis is a Latin expression for wonderful year, a year of wonders. Inspired by the true story of Eyam, a village in the rugged hill country of England, Year of Wonders is a richly detailed evocation of a singular moment in history. The themes are witchcraft, madness, and repressed sexuality. The book also has the themes of strength, women's power, religion, and trust. So, by exploring all these references of epidemics or pandemics in literature, what is that we can think of? Literature what is that we can conclude? Literature has always linked sin and plague, portraying devastating disease as punishment for man's sins. It also has exposed time and again the great human ego, which convinces us that we are invincible. The lesson to be learned here is that epidemics are caused by the carelessness and a criminally casual attitude to infectious diseases in their nascent stages, allowing them to inflate into pandemics. So this is what even we have done. Our government has done. It remained careless. We should have prevented the entry of Indians coming from foreign countries, which if we had quarantined them in the initial stage, let's say in the month of January, February, today we wouldn't have experienced the economic tragedy that all of us are experiencing, and even the deaths. Then the advantages of social evolution, technology, and modern medicine is notwithstanding, the journey of pandemic's birth and maturation are still the same as in olden times. The most effective way to stop a communicable disease from being an epidemic is to nip it in its bud through quarantine and awareness. In today's complicated geopolitical scenario, it is imperative to maintain unity in order to beat such threats as COVID-19 without thinking of borders and social evils such as corruption, greed, racism, and communalism. It's unfortunate that even in these times, we are fighting on this basis. So what does the experience of Japan say? Though Japan had experienced this kind of plague in early 1910s. So since then, they are practicing social distancing, they are wearing masks in public places, they are maintaining hygiene. We should learn from the experience of Japan. And another blunder that we have committed is we have not learned from history and literature. History has taught us many things. We have not learned from it. How to focus on how to create remedial measures for pandemics. Even today, our medical infrastructure is pathetic. We don't have hospitals. Even if you have hospitals, there are no proper equipment. Even if you have equipment, there are no doctors. So this is the case. And even literature has guided time and again what has to be done. Even then, we have not followed. So ultimately, what is the importance of literature through storytelling? So what can literature do in these times of pandemic? It can act as a moral support. Pandemic literature exists not just to analyze the reasons for the pestilence. That may not even be its primary purpose. Rather, the telling of stories is a reminder that sense still exists somewhere, that if there is not meaning outside of the quarantine zone, there is at least meaning within our invented stories. Literature is a reclamation against that which illness represents, that the world is not our own. So here literature gives a moral support to people who are devastated, demoralized, and have lost hope due to the loss of their loved ones, or loss of job, or loss of livelihood. So these are further books that deal with plagues and other diseases. These are my references, and with this I conclude my talk by expressing my gratitude to frontline warriors. I thank you all for your patient listening. Stay safe and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Any questions from any of the participants? Any questions? Any questions? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
So I think there is no question. To express my profound gratitude to Preetham sir. Thank you, sir, for such an enriching and enlightening talk. We really enjoyed this session. It was really a very interesting session. Thank you for delivering such an exemplary presentation. I would also like to thank Dr. Vincent sir for being with us. And I would also like to thank all the participants for actively participating in the conference, and thank you for cooperating with us. And with this, I would like to end today's session. We are meeting again tomorrow at the same time, but you need to log in 20 minutes before to avoid the last minute rush. And I hope everybody has filled the feedback form. Sir, there is a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
From Dr. Mamta Trivedi. How the pandemic
How
ends.
the pandemic ends. Pandemic will, see, even if this COVID pandemic ends, there could be another pandemic in future. So the only way to end is taking precautionary and preventive measures. We should learn from history. That is what I mentioned. We should learn from history and what literature teaches us. See, we should enhance our medical infrastructure facilities. We should appoint more doctors, train more doctors. The problem is, in our medical education, we are not giving lot of opportunities to talented people. Okay, the main problem is that of management quota seats, and all these people get into open private hospitals and in most cases, deny treatment to poor people. So only when you enhance the infrastructure of hospitals and human resource related to that, we can't stop pandemic. We can only prevent.
Thank you, sir.
So there is one more question from Dr. Nargis Tabassum.
Yes, is the darkness and decay of pandemic reflected in literature is a reflection of the spiritual barrenness or the wasteland of human indifference or to suffering? Yes, ma'am, it's another way of looking at it, another perspective. We can say spiritual barrenness also. That's what many a times, even in literature and even at times, general perception, people say it's God sent. It's God sent. Even today, even in newspapers, people are opining COVID is boon as well as a bane, because nature revived itself. Nature revived itself. We had exploited nature to a very great extent, and most of us got to know our work would be done from home, and wildlife came back to life. So you can even say spiritual barrenness. Yes, I agree with that, man. I agree with that this pandemic reflected in literature also reflects spiritual barrenness and also human indifference to suffering. Yes. See, we have lost sensitivity towards the sufferings of fellow human beings. And you can't even blame other people for that. Let's say while walking along the road, if somebody falls down, you're not in a position to help him or her because you are afraid that you may contact corona from them. So we have reached that stage. So we will hopefully see such type of pandemics have epidemic has come, and human race has won it. And as per scientific reports, today also I read in the newspaper that Oxford University is coming up with a vaccination. Hopefully by this year end, we can find a vaccination for corona, and we can come back to normalcy by the beginning of next year. I hope I answered your question, ma'am. Nervous, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Any other question from any of the participants?
Can I speak a few words?
Yes, sir,
Professor
please.
Preetham, okay? It was a beautiful, session. And I really appreciate your reading. You know, you have done a lot of homework. And it's not easy, you know, to speak about, when we speak about this pandemic, we become emotional. But you took us back to the ancient literature. I mean, it started with the Iliad, and from there you beautifully chronologically you devised your session today, which gave kind of continuity, further continuity for us to research, and if people are interested to do more research on this pandemic, you have given them a platform. That's what I appreciate with the youngsters like you. You know, I really feel so happy when the youngsters like you do a lot of homework, a lot of reading, and reading is very visible in your session today. To add to it, you know, literature from the very beginning, it has been warning the world, not only of this epidemic or pandemic, about every incident, you know, every incident that occurs in future. You, if you fall back to literature, you have certain somewhere hidden in literature, but still we don't give so much of attention to it because nobody wants literature now. People want to rewrite history. You know, you must be aware of it. People want to rewrite history. They do not want to have to carry on the pain that people have, you know, undergone on the pages of literature, because that might give a bad picture of the people, those who were in authority or those who were ruling us, so to say. So they do not want, you know, people to remember then on such and such a age, I mean, such age, this happened and so on. That's why they rewrite. They want to forget what had happened. But literature will keep everyone on their toes. And it make them think, yeah, this happened. Maybe after a century, people might read this particular COVID-19 literature. Maybe, I mean, there's a lot of literature is being produced. How seriously it is produced, it's a different matter. But serious, you know, academicians are writing their research papers, their, you know, stories or poems or something like that. After some years, when the people read, oh, they will realize, yes, we shouldn't have done this again. You know, because of this pandemic, COVID-19 came, and now again another pandemic has come. We shouldn't have done this. But this particular, I mean, that should end somewhere. This particular COVID-19 has to be, I mean, warning, has to send a very clear signal to the entire globe saying that if you are not, you said it, you know, we have started to live with the nature. And that is where the panacea is. You live with the nature. Nature will give, you know, panacea to everything. Nature will give a solution to everything, and we will have to realize to it. You know, as I said, the wild animals, they have come to the roads because roads have been, you know, done in the middle of the forest. And where will the animals go? So that's what you said. I really appreciate, and this is one of the best sessions I attended. So I wish you all the best. Wish you all the best. God bless.
I hope I did justice for the opportunity given.
Of course, you have done. You know, I mean, you know, this is how the researchers should, step by step. You referred to so many books. You know, even somebody has not written that book. See, this Black Death. I've not seen it. I want to see it today. I want to go back home, and I want to once again go to Black Death and connect that Black Death to our COVID situation. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you, Vincent sir. Thank you, Preetham sir.
Thank you.
Christy ma'am won't be speaking because there is some connectivity error from her side. So thank you again, sir. And let's end this session. We are meeting again tomorrow at the same time, and the same meeting and ID and password will work for